All right, so before I get into describing the case first, I want to briefly discuss, first who I am and where I had the pleasure of doing my internship experience and where I got to follow the case that I chose to follow for this course. So first and foremost, my name is Matthew. I'm a licensed social worker here in Reno, Nevada, and I'm looking forward to graduating with my MSW, much like you guys are here in a short week and a half. For my specific field placement, I had the pleasure of being placed with the VA Sierra Nevada Healthcare System, which is the Veterans Hospital here in Reno, Nevada. While my specific role there was shuffled around kind of throughout my two terms, primarily speaking, I did have one really consistent and concise client engagement that I got to follow, which ended up being the case study that I was part of. And so this specific veteran that I ended up following was an inpatient resident veteran that they call him there within the CLC, which is the Community Living Center at the VA. This specific uh, living environment, the CLC, is much like a skilled nursing facility. However, the only difference is that it's well within the VA hospital, and in addition to that, it's also a VA benefit. And so veterans who are admitted to the hospital for any reason, be it they are 0% service connected or 100% service connected, their stay in the CLC is not limited to a specific time frame, and they'll never see a bill for it. So it's a great benefit, but because of that, the VA tends to put their most complicated cases there in the CLC. So now, kind of jumping into this specific case that I had the pleasure of following, I do have to give it the credit it deserves. This case has been developing for the last 2 years before I came in was ever even a part of it. However, when I did step in, I stepped in at a really pivotal moment. And in the last 6 or 8 months that I've been with the VA, I've actually been able to see some really big moments in this case and actually just finally get the hearing not a week and a half ago, right before I'm now done with my internship. So this case specifically, it's about a veteran who, um, and of course for HIP, I can't share his name or anything, but he was an individual who's been he's been living in and around the United States in different states for years, and most recently he's been living kind of from campsite to campsite in California. Technically speaking, you could refer to this man as homeless. For court documents, he was always referred to as transient, and the fact that he never had a specific location in which he lived in. It was always changing kind of day in and day out. So this transient individual, he hasn't once declared that he's necessarily living in California. However, he's been in California most recently, and then and just a couple years ago, he was in his car driving from California to Nevada on Interstate I-80. Now, if you're familiar with that freeway at all, you know that it's kind of through the mountains, it's all by itself, and it transits the border from California to Nevada. Now, what was interesting is as he was approaching the border of Nevada, he hadn't been in Nevada yet, he was still in California. He was involved in a car accident that placed him obviously with REMSA and brought to the hospital, to which from that point they recognized that he was a veteran and offered him the opportunity to be placed within the VA's care, which he said yes. So from there, this individual was transferred to the VA here in Reno, Nevada, which is interesting because he hadn't even once been in Nevada previously. He was in California, although he was transitioning into Nevada. He had not in any form or stated these sense had established residency in Nevada. However, the VA system has catchment areas. They don't necessarily abide by state boundaries and laws and stuff. And so the VA catchment area for Reno was catching the area of the Interstate 80, and so that's where he was transferred. To which point, long story short, much like many complicated cases, this individual was found to be he has dementia. He had a neurosyphilis, which basically he was confused. He's unable to care for himself, and from this point, there is no way he can be his own responsible party. And then the VA in their place in trying to secure this man a safe and secure environment going forward identified his need for guardianship. Now, if you're not familiar with guardianship in a really simple sense is typically through the states, although there are private guardianship offices that honor the fact that individuals, due to obviously more often than not complex medical conditions, are unable to care for themselves. Guardianship awards individuals someone who can make decisions on their behalf. Now, that's different from power of attorney, where power of attorney allows individuals to make decisions if a specific individual suddenly becomes unaware or unable to, where guardianship permanently removes that right from the individual and gives it to the guardian. It's not something to take lightly, but the VA in this sense saw no family, no interaction, no intention, and this man needed guardianship in order to take care of his affairs, his estates, and his personal life decisions. So they went forward, they petitioned to the Washoe County Public Guardianship Office, which is especially interesting, to which they approved the case. Now, none of this sounds terribly alarming. However, to be a ward of the state in Nevada through the the Washoe County Public Guardianship Office, you have to be a Nevada resident. And I don't have the statute here in front of me, but there's a statute that is Nevada law. And if you remember, prior to me kind of describing this case before we got started, this individual is by no means a Nevada resident. I mean, he was very loosely a California resident, if you even want to call it that. However, he was self-described as transient in nature, and in his defense, he was intending to transition over a state line into the state of Nevada. However, due to the car crash and his condition, he never verbally stated, I, insert name here, wish to desire in the state of Nevada. And that becomes an issue because he was awarded guardianship. And now here's the Washoe County Public Guardianship Office saying this is not only unethical, but it's illegal. We cannot provide this man guardianship services. And so they actually brought it to court, and then it's an interesting case, and so it trickled up, and then enter my opportunity to then step into this case. And so right when I started as an intern, this veteran was, his hearing before the Nevada Supreme Court over in Carson City was slotted, and I had the great pleasure of going with the social work exec to be in the court and actually be an acting member of the representing party behind this veteran in the court hearing, which was incredible. And so, essentially speaking, the Washoe County Public Guardianship Office did not want to follow this man because in their eyes it was illegal and unethical to provide services, being that he's not a Nevada resident. And they cited the statutes that he never intended to reside in Nevada. He never verbalized his intent to be here longer than a day or two, if that at all. And then, however, the VA argued that very briefly he was released from the VA emergency room and given housing through a program called HUD-VASH, which is like the homeless center, to which he does not have to accept and he does not have to use those services. However, he did, albeit for a night or two. It wasn't very long until he landed back up in the ER. He did willingly accept those services and choose, in doing so, to stay in Nevada. However, that does not necessarily mean he's a Nevada state resident, and we are definitely jumping the line here on ethics on whether or not this case can even be a guardianship case in the state of Nevada. So the Nevada Supreme Court heard it. They heard both sides. The Washoe County Public Guardianship Office, I think, had a decent case, and I don't think they were unjust in arguing that this man needed guardianship, and I don't think the VA was necessarily unethical in their desire to pursue guardianship for this man, because it's not illegal or unethical to pursue referrals that may or not be accepted, and it was. I mean, regardless of what it was, the Washoe County Public Guardianship Office accepted the referral and approved it before the court, be it gray area or not. This man was receiving guardianship services, and so now kind of enter my 2 cents and where I've been. And so I was never this veteran's case manager. I was never his social worker. I was never providing him any kind of clinical services. I was merely an intern, which I think made it interesting for me in the sense that I was in no position to leverage the court for this individual. I was in no position to change anything about his case. I was also in no position to really even pursue different interventions for this individual, because interventions were already being made as far as the Supreme Court was concerned. So my place was more in I think getting to know this veteran and providing him just the person to listen to what he had to say and give him that attention, because with his neurosyphilis and his dementia, he became very agitated if he wasn't given direct attention. And so a lot of times, and a lot of the VA employees don't have the time of day to just be around him. And so that's where my place came in. So over the semester and a half or so, I had the great pleasure of getting to sit down with this individual and get to know him, get to know what his likes and dislikes are, and just kind of give him the attention that I think he more subconsciously was demanding, although he didn't realize it. He wanted someone to hear his story, and that's a lot of what I did. And then so then going forward, it became interesting because again, this massive legal case and things were happening. But the Nevada Supreme Court did ultimately actually uphold the state's decision to award this individual guardianship, which was interesting. And in doing so, they're right now they're in the middle of petitioning and actually changing state law. Now there's the precedent from this court hearing. But what's so interesting about it is that prior to this, and this will change as election seasons come around, but the Nevada law is that individuals receiving guardianship in the state of Nevada have to be Nevada residents. Now, the verbiage of that statute is being changed to have to intend to reside in the state of Nevada. And then the substatutes to that are going to be left vague on purpose, because the intent to reside in the state of Nevada, or in any state, for example, can be very loose, and for a lot of people can vary case by case. I mean, you can have someone who has dementia, you can have someone who's in a coma, you can have, I mean, anything. Oftentimes, cases are not black and white, and there is by no means a hard line that someone can and will often state their intent to reside somewhere. That doesn't necessarily happen every time. So they have to be loose in their interpretation of that statute, and at the end of the day, as long as the medical provider, be it the VA or whatever hospital, as long as the Washoe County Public Guardianship Office, as long as the social workers, whoever the responsible parties here in these cases, as long as these parties are upholding the hard ethics that if state services are to be provided, we want to provide them to state citizens. Now, again, that's loose, but we want to make sure that if we're providing services, it's appropriate, it's ethical, and it's always an effort to provide the resident, the veteran, the individual, the services that he or she may need. And so in this case, guardianship was more than appropriate. I think the Supreme Court saw that. And I think although they could have ruled one direction or the other, they decided to rule in favor of the veteran, because this was in his best intention. And although gray, he's now a Nevada resident. So that's kind of what we're doing. And I think as we discussed the interventions and everything that I did, I think it became interesting with my supervisor, because we were just more discussing the premise of what intervention did I provide and what insight did I provide, and to which I talked about how I was just kind of being the intermittent communicator between myself and the veteran and his social workers, and just kind of drawing the bridge between him and his inability to, or lack of desire to discuss with social workers about what he's going through. And so I ended up being a lot of that and helping the veteran in that sense, which was great. And so that's a lot of what I did. My supervisor was more than happy with the work that I had done as far as this case goes, and I was really glad to be able to hear the state ruling before I left. And so that's kind of where this case was, and now it stands. I think it provides an interesting precedent, because this case now will set nationally for all VAs, and no matter what state it is that it's in, for what the VA does and how the catchment areas have to play within the state boundaries, and that's kind of that. And so I had a great honor in being part of this case, and I now have a better understanding of how the guardianship process, although I know it was complicated, can be even more complicated than that. And so that's kind of where I've been. That's what I've been doing. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to comment down below and we can discuss further. Again, thank you.